The wind cut through Fort Carson like a blade, carrying snow that felt more like sand. Captain Sarah Vance stood alone on the tarmac, watching the Chinook's rotors spin down, and thought about ghosts. 6 months. That's how long it had been since she'd held a rifle in anger. 6 months since the board cleared her. 6 months since Lieutenant Thomas Reeves stopped breathing in her arms, while Christmas lights flickered in a village neither of them could pronounce. The rifle case at her feet weighed 55 pounds. She'd carried heavier. The guilt weighed more. "Captain Vance?" She turned. A Marine private, maybe 20, held a clipboard like it might explode. "Commander Knox is waiting in the ops tent, ma'am." Sarah shouldered the case and followed. Her boots crunched through fresh powder. Somewhere across the base, someone was playing Bing Crosby, White Christmas. She'd stopped believing in those. The operations tent smelled like diesel fuel and bad coffee. Commander David Knox stood over a topographical map, 42 years old, with the kind of posture that said, "Former enlisted." The crow's feet around his eyes said he'd seen things that maps couldn't show. He didn't look up when she entered. "Captain Vance, I'm told you're the attachment nobody requested." "Yes, sir." Knox finally met her eyes. Cold evaluation. She'd seen it before. "Your file reads like a redacted CIA brief. Everything interesting is blacked out. What's not blacked out says you've been riding a desk for half a year." He tapped the folder. One note made it through. "Friendly fire incident, cleared, fitness for duty approved." Sarah said nothing. There was nothing to say. "Captain Ellis tells me you're my problem now. That high command thinks you need a win." Knox closed the folder. "I don't need projects. I need operators. You understand the difference?" "Yes, sir. I understand the difference." "Do you?" He walked around the table. "Because in 18 hours, I'm taking my team into rough country on thin intel to extract a high-value target. If someone slows us down, people die. If someone makes a mistake, people die. And I've already buried enough people for 3 careers." Sarah kept her eyes forward. "I won't slow you down, sir, and I don't make mistakes." Something flickered across Knox's face. Not quite belief, not quite dismissal. "Everyone makes mistakes, Captain. The question is whether you've learned from yours." He handed her a mission brief. 2 pages, mostly logistics. "We roll out at 0500. Don't be late." Sarah took the brief and left. Outside, the snow was falling harder. Somewhere in her pack, wrapped in a plastic bag, was a photograph of a young Marine with Tommy Reeves' smile. She didn't need to look at it. She saw it every time she closed her eyes. The team briefing happened at 0430 in a prefab building that shook every time the wind gusted. 8 men in various states of wakefulness, drinking coffee that could strip paint. They went quiet when Sarah walked in. Staff Sergeant Colin Price nodded once. He was 38, lean, with the steady hands of a career marksman. Sarah recognized the type. He'd reserved judgment until he saw her shoot. Sergeant Derek Foster was different. 33, built like he'd played linebacker in college, with opinions he didn't bother hiding. "So this is the attachment." Foster didn't quite spit the words, but close. "Ma'am, no disrespect, but we're going into alpine terrain in December. 80-pound packs, negative temperatures, vertical climbs. That rifle case of yours looks like it weighs more than you do." 60 pounds, with ammunition. Sarah set the case down gently. "The Barrett's 55. I'm 130. I've carried heavier loads over worse ground." "Yeah?" Foster crossed his arms. "When was your last field deployment?" 6 months ago, Afghanistan. "And how'd that go?" The room went very quiet. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, Knox's XO, cleared his throat like he might intervene, but Knox raised a hand. "She's here, Foster. She's on the team. You got a problem with that? Put it in writing, and I'll read it when we get back." Knox turned to the map. "Now shut up and pay attention." The target was simple on paper. Echo 7, an abandoned mining village in the Colorado Rockies, where 3 county lines met, and nobody cared which flag you flew. Intel suggested a high-value target, some paramilitary leader using the location as a waypoint between larger operations. Light security, quick in, quick out. Sarah studied the topography. The village sat in a valley surrounded by ridgelines. One in particular caught her attention. Northwest face, steep, exposed. "What's the elevation gain to that ridge?" she pointed. Knox checked his notes. 900 meters vertical. Why? Good overwatch position. In theory, Price spoke for the first time. But in this weather, with that wind exposure, you'd freeze solid before you got your scope zeroed. Assuming you could climb it at all. Sarah nodded slowly, filed the information away. The brief continued. Insertion by vehicle, then on foot for the last 3 clicks. Extraction via the same route, with air support on standby if things went sideways. Standard operation. By the book. Sarah had learned the hard way that nothing stayed by the book once bullets started flying. They rolled out in the dark. 2 Humvees, chains on the tires, crawling up roads that barely deserved the name. Sarah sat in the back of the second vehicle, rifle case between her knees, watching the world turn white outside. Webb tried conversation. First deployment in Colorado? Yes. It's different from overseas. Feels wrong somehow, doing this kind of work on home soil. Sarah watched the snow. Evil doesn't stop at borders. I suppose not. Webb was quiet for a moment. Can I ask what happened? In Afghanistan? You can ask. He didn't push. Good instincts. Foster was less subtle. You know what I think? I think someone upstairs is making a point. Proving women can do this job by throwing you into a mission that's already planned and staffed. If it goes well, they take credit. If it goes bad, you take the fall. Sarah finally looked at him. You think I'm here for politics? Aren't you? I'm here because 18 men are going into hostile territory and someone thought you needed a sniper. What you think about my chromosomes isn't my problem. What you think about my shooting better not be. Price almost smiled. Almost. The vehicles stopped 2 clicks from the village. The rest was on foot. Sarah slung her pack, lifted the rifle case, and fell into formation without a word. The snow was ankle deep and getting deeper. Foster muttered something about dead weight. Sarah ignored him. She'd heard worse from better men. The approach took 90 minutes. By the time they reached the ridgeline overlooking Echo 7, Sarah's thighs were burning and her lungs felt like ice. She didn't show it, never show it. The village looked like something from a postcard gone wrong. Wood frame buildings, most of them collapsing. A central square with a frozen fountain. And Christmas lights. Someone had strung them across what might have been a general store. Red and green bulbs, half of them shot out or burned out. The rest flickered weakly, running on a generator somewhere that coughed and sputtered. Knox used thermal imaging. I'm counting 8 heat signatures, maybe 10, clustered around the center building. Looks like our intel was good for once. Sarah borrowed his scope and studied the terrain, the village, the approaches, that northwest ridge, impossibly steep, impossibly exposed. Perfect. Movement, Webb pointed. East side. A figure crossed between buildings. Armed. Alert. Professional posture. Knox keyed his radio. All elements, we have eyes on target location. Prepare for insertion on my mark. That's when the first mortar round hit. It landed in the square, 30 meters from the central building. The explosion threw snow and frozen earth 20 feet in the air. The Christmas lights flickered and died. Contact! Webb was already moving. That wasn't outgoing, that was incoming. More mortars. Walking pattern, methodical, searching. Then machine gun fire erupted from 3 positions simultaneously. Tracer rounds cut through the falling snow like laser shows. Knox's voice was ice. All elements, abort insertion. Fall back to rally point Alpha. This is not a soft target. Repeat, not a soft target. But there was nowhere to fall back to. They were exposed on open ground, and the enemy had them ranged. A round snapped past Sarah's head close enough to feel. She dropped flat, using the rifle case as cover. Inadequate, but better than nothing. "We need to move," Foster was shouting. "We're sitting ducks out here." Knox was on the radio, voice clipped and professional despite the chaos. "Bravo 6, this is actual. We are taking effective fire from multiple positions. Request immediate close air support." The response crackled through. "Actual, negative on air support. Weather is below minimums. I say again, unable to support at this time." Knox's jaw tightened. "Copy. Break. All elements push forward to the village. Use the buildings for cover. Move, move, move." They ran. Not a tactical advance, a survival sprint. Bullets kicked up snow around their boots. Someone screamed. Sarah saw one of the team go down, clutching his leg. Webb and another SEAL grabbed him, dragging him forward. They made it to what had been a church. Stone walls, mostly intact. The team piled inside, breathing hard, checking for wounds. "Head count," Knox barked. "Thompson's hit, leg wound, through and through." The corpsman, a kid named Davis, was already working. Wallace took shrapnel to the shoulder. Martinez has a concussion from the blast. Everyone else is mobile. "How many hostiles?" Knox looked at Price. "I counted at least 20 distinct firing positions, sir. Maybe more. And I saw muzzle flashes from heavier weapons. 50s, maybe. This isn't a waypoint. This is a staging area." Knox's face went hard. "Intel was wrong. We walked into a hornet's nest." Webb checked his ammunition. "We need extraction, sir. We're outgunned and low on ammo. If they push, we won't hold." "I'm aware, Lieutenant." Knox keyed his radio. "Bravo 6, be advised. We have 3 urgent surgical, 5 routine wounded. We need immediate dust-off." "Actual, unable to comply. Weather conditions are 0-0. Earliest possible extraction is dawn. That's 6 hours out." 6 hours. Sarah looked around the church. Stone walls wouldn't stop 50s. The wooden roof was barely keeping the snow out. If the enemy decided to push with armor or heavy weapons, this position would become a tomb. She moved to a shattered window and studied the terrain. The village. The enemy positions. That ridge, barely visible through the snow. 3,000 meters, maybe more. Extreme range. Beyond anything in the textbooks. Beyond anything in the record books. She thought about Tommy Reeves, about his last words, whispered through blood and pain, about the promise she'd made, kneeling in snow while Christmas lights died in the distance. Sarah pulled out her rangefinder, dialed in the numbers, the ridge to the most likely enemy command position. The device chirped once. 3,847 meters. Impossible. "Vance, what are you doing?" Knox was beside her. Sarah lowered the rangefinder. "Considering options, sir." "What options? We're pinned down, outgunned, and 6 hours from extraction. Our options are survive or don't. There's a third option," she pointed to the ridge. "That position gives line of sight to their command element. If I can get up there, I can disrupt their coordination. Maybe buy you the time you need." Knox stared at her like she'd suggested sprouting wings. "That ridge? In this storm? Captain, that's a 900-meter vertical climb with 0 cover and winds that'll blow you off the mountain. You'd die before you made it halfway." "Maybe, but if I make it, and if I can take the shot, your wounded might live." Sarah met his eyes. "That's not maybe, sir. That's certainty." "What shot? You're talking about extreme range in the worst possible conditions. The world record is 2,500 meters. You'd be shooting almost 4,000. 3,847, sir. I measured." Price was listening now. Foster, too. The whole team. "Captain Vance," Knox's voice dropped. "I appreciate the volunteer spirit, but I'm not sending someone to die on a ridge for a shot that can't be made." "Can't be made?" Sarah kept her voice level. "Corporal Rob Furlong, Canadian Forces, made a 2,400-meter shot in Afghanistan, 2002. Sergeant Craig Harrison, British Army, made a 24-75-meter shot in Helmand Province, 2009. I've studied every long-range kill on record, sir. I know what's possible. Those were different conditions, different shooters, different records. Sarah picked up her rifle case. Records exist to be broken. Knox grabbed her arm. This isn't about ego or proving a point. If you go up there and fail, you die. If you go up there and succeed, you're still exposed to counterfire. Either way, I lose an operator. Sarah gently removed his hand. Sir, you asked if I understood the difference between projects and operators. An operator does whatever it takes to complete the mission. That's what I am. That's all I've ever been. She was moving toward the door when Knox called out. Why Christmas? Sarah stopped, didn't turn around. Why does it matter that it's Christmas, Captain? The question hung in the frozen air. Outside, mortars were still falling. Inside, wounded men were bleeding into gauze and prayer. Because 6 months ago, my spotter died on Christmas Eve. Because he died covering a mistake I made. Because I've been trying to figure out how to balance those scales ever since. She looked back at Knox. And because nobody else should have to die on Christmas. Not your men, not mine, nobody. Knox studied her face for a long moment. Webb was shaking his head. Foster looked like he wanted to object. Price was perfectly still, watching, evaluating. You'll die up there, Knox said quietly. Maybe, but I'll die anyway if I don't try. And so will you. Knox closed his eyes. The decision played out across his face. Command weight, impossible choices. The kind of call that ended careers or saved lives, sometimes both. He opened his eyes. Go. Sarah nodded once, turned to leave. Captain? She paused. Make it count. Sarah stepped out into the storm. The climb was everything Knox warned it would be, and worse. The wind didn't just blow, it attacked. It found every gap in her cold weather gear, every exposed inch of skin. The slope was too steep to walk, so she climbed, pulling herself up by rock outcroppings and frozen bushes that came loose in her hands. The rifle case banged against her spine with every movement. The pack straps cut into her shoulders. Her hands went numb inside her gloves within the first 10 minutes. She ignored it all. Tommy's voice in her head. Her first deployment, her first long shot. His Boston accent making everything sound like philosophy. Pain is just information, Vance. Your body telling you something. You don't have to listen. She didn't listen. 50 meters up, she stopped to check her gear. Everything secure. The Barrett's still safe in its case. She allowed herself 10 seconds to breathe, then continued. 100 meters. 200. The village below was becoming a toy model. She could see the muzzle flashes, tiny sparks in the white. Could hear the gunfire, muted by distance in snow. 300 meters. Her legs were screaming. She fell twice, catching herself on rock faces that tore through her gloves. Blood made the next handhold slippery. She wiped it on her pants and kept climbing. 400 meters. 500. The world narrowed to the next grip, the next foothold, the next breath. Nothing else existed, just the mountain and the climb and the promise. 600 meters. She was above the tree line now, pure exposure. The wind hit her with physical force, trying to tear her off the rock. She pressed flat against the stone, waiting for a lull, then moved. 700 meters. 800. Her calves were cramping. Her fingers had stopped sending signals. She couldn't feel her feet. Hypothermia was setting in. She knew the signs. Didn't care. 850 meters. Almost there. The ridge was visible above, a knife edge of rock and ice. She could see where she needed to be. One more push. 900 meters. Sarah collapsed onto the ridge, gasping. For 30 seconds she just lay there, feeling her heart hammer against frozen ground. Then training took over. She pulled the rifle case to her, popped the latches with fingers that barely worked. The Barrett M82A1 emerged like a hibernating animal. 55 pounds of American engineering, designed to kill things at distances that shouldn't be possible. She assembled it methodically. Barrel, stock, scope, bipod. Every movement practiced 10,000 times. Even with numb fingers, even with the wind trying to blow the pieces away, she built it perfectly. Magazine loaded, 10 rounds of .50 BMG, 661 grain bullets, each one capable of punching through an engine block. She chambered the first round. The sound of the bolt sliding home was the most beautiful thing she'd heard in months. Sarah pulled out her rangefinder, steadied it against a rock, aimed at the enemy command vehicle, barely visible through the storm. The number appeared. 3,847 meters. She keyed her radio with hands that shook from cold and adrenaline. Actual, this is Overwatch. Static. Then Knox's voice, disbelief and hope fighting for control. Vance, report your position. Northwest Ridge, approximately 900 meters above your position. I have eyes on the village. More static. She could almost hear the team looking at each other. Overwatch, confirm you're on that ridge, the one we discussed. Confirm, sir, and I have a gift for you. Price's voice cut in. Ma'am, if you're where I think you are, you're at extreme range. Beyond extreme. That's not shooting, that's prayer. I've said enough prayers, Sergeant. Time for work. Sarah adjusted her scope. I'm looking at what appears to be a command vehicle. BTR-80, modified, approximately 200 meters behind their forward positions. Radio antenna, multiple personnel. That's your coordination element. Knox again. Range to target? 3,847 meters. Silence. Long enough that Sarah thought the radio had died. Overwatch, say again your last. 3,847 meters, sir. Webb this time. Jesus Christ, the record is 2475. Was 2475, Lieutenant? Sarah started calculating. Wind speed, direction, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure. The numbers filled her head. I'm going to need you to trust me. Trust you? Knox sounded like a man at the end of a very frayed rope. Captain, that's 1,300 meters beyond the longest confirmed kill in history. In a snowstorm. At night. That's not trust, that's faith. Then have faith, sir. More silence. Sarah used it to run calculations. The ballistic computer in her scope gave her a firing solution. She didn't trust it. Computers were useful, but they couldn't feel the wind, couldn't read the air, couldn't account for the way cold air density changed as the bullet descended through altitude bands. Her father had taught her that. He'd been a Marine sniper in Vietnam, back when scopes were iron and calculations were done in your head, or not at all. Computers give you math, baby girl, but you give it soul. She closed her eyes, listened to the wind. It came in waves, cycling every 30 seconds or so. Stronger, weaker, stronger, weaker. A rhythm you could time if you paid attention. Overwatch, be advised. Knox's voice was tight. Your position is exposed. If you fire, they'll see the muzzle flash. They'll know where you are. Yes, sir. If they locate you, they'll return fire. Artillery, mortars, everything they've got. You'll have maybe 2 minutes before that ridge becomes a kill zone. Understood, sir. So I'll ask you one more time. Are you certain about this shot? Sarah opened her eyes. Through the scope, magnified 12 times, she could see a man standing beside the command vehicle. Officer, probably, smoking a cigarette because officers only smoked in combat when they thought they'd already won. He was talking to someone inside the vehicle, gesturing, confident. His men were winning. His plan was working. In 6 hours, he'd have killed 18 American soldiers and could report a successful engagement. She thought about Tommy Reeves, about his smile in that photograph, about the way he'd talked about his wife, about their plans to have kids, about the house they were going to buy in Vermont with the big yard and the view of the mountains. About how none of that happened because Sarah took a shot she shouldn't have taken. I'm certain of my skill, sir. I'm certain of my equipment. What I'm not certain of is whether you're willing to bet your men's lives that I'm telling the truth. Knox's breath was audible over the radio. If you miss, you've given away your position for nothing. If I miss, sir, I'm dead in 2 minutes. If I hit, your attackers lose coordination, and you might have enough time to break contact and get your wounded to safety. She paused. Clock's ticking, Commander. More silence. She could imagine the scene in that ruined church. Knox looking at his wounded men, at his ammunition count, at his options, all of them bad. Why Christmas, Vance? The question again. She'd answered it once, but he needed to hear it again, needed to understand. Because Lieutenant Thomas Reeves, my spotter, died on Christmas Eve 6 months ago. Because he died covering my mistake. Because I've been carrying that weight every day since. Her voice was steady. And because he wouldn't want anyone else to carry it. Not me, not you, not your men. Nobody should die on Christmas, sir. That's why. The radio crackled. Knox's voice when it came was different. Less commander, more human. Permission granted, Captain. Take your shot. Sarah felt something unlock in her chest. Permission granted. 3 words she'd waited 6 months to hear. She settled into position, bipod firm against rock, body aligned, left hand supporting the stock, right hand on the grip, finger resting beside the trigger guard. Not on the trigger, not yet. Through the scope, the world became small. Just the target, just the shot, just the promise. The wind was building, worse conditions than she'd calculated for. Good. She'd never trusted easy shots. Her breathing slowed. 4 counts in, hold. 4 counts out. The scope reticle settled on a point in empty space 3 meters ahead of where the target was standing, leading by 3 meters, accounting for wind drift, bullet drop, the rotation of the Earth itself. At this range, the Coriolis effect was real, measurable, lethal if ignored. Sarah closed her eyes one last time, felt the wind cycle, waited for the lull. It came. She opened her eyes. The man by the vehicle turned, facing almost directly toward her, across 3,847 meters of storm and darkness and impossibility. Sarah whispered 6 words, not a prayer, a promise. This one's for you, Tommy. Then she pressed the trigger. The sound was biblical, not just a gunshot, but an announcement that physics had been violated and the universe needed to respond. The Barrett's muzzle brake directed the blast sideways, turning falling snow into a horizontal explosion of white. The recoil drove back into Sarah's shoulder with enough force to shift her entire body against the rock. But Sarah wasn't watching the rifle. She was watching the bullet. Not physically, impossible at this distance. But in her mind, trained by 10,000 hours behind a scope, she could see it, track it, follow its path like a mathematician watching an equation solve itself in real time. The .50 BMG round left the barrel at 2,799 feet per second, faster than the Chinook that brought her here, faster than sound itself, though not by much at this altitude, in this cold. At 1,000 meters, it was still supersonic, cutting through air molecules that weren't prepared for what was coming. The bullet shed velocity with every foot, fighting gravity, fighting wind, fighting the universe's fundamental preference for things to slow down and stop. At 2,000 meters, it began to drop. Following the parabola she'd calculated, falling toward Earth while simultaneously being pushed east by the crosswind. 12 knots, gusting to 15, enough to move a half-inch diameter projectile several feet off course. She'd accounted for that, leading the target by 3 full meters. At 3,000 meters, the bullet was traveling slower than sound. No longer a crack, but a whisper. Invisible. Inevitable. At 3,847 meters, it arrived. The man by the command vehicle had just turned back to speak to someone inside when his chest simply opened. That's what a .50 BMG round does at the end of its flight path. It doesn't punch through, it excavates. The kinetic energy remaining, even after nearly 4,000 meters, was enough to lift him off his feet and throw him backward 3 meters into the snow. He was dead before his body understood what had happened. Through the scope, Sarah watched him fall. Watched the confusion ripple through the people around him. Watched them scatter, seeking cover from a threat they couldn't see, couldn't comprehend, couldn't fight. She was already chambering another round. The brass casing ejected, tumbling down the mountain slope, carrying away heat and smoke. It landed somewhere in the snow. Evidence, proof. Later, if there was a later, someone would find it and wonder. Target 2. A soldier who'd run to the fallen commander, trying to drag him to safety. Brave, stupid, dead. Sarah adjusted for the new position. Less wind correction needed. The soldier had moved slightly into the lee of the vehicle. She compensated, led by 2 meters this time, squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared again, another muzzle flash lighting up the ridge, another brass casing spinning away into darkness. 3.4 seconds of flight time. The soldier dropped like someone had cut his strings. Target 3. Someone in the command vehicle, trying desperately to use the radio. Sarah could see the antenna moving, see the silhouette through the armored glass. She adjusted aim, not for the person, for the antenna array itself. If she could kill their communications, she could kill their coordination. She fired. The bullet struck the antenna mount and everything above it simply disintegrated. The figure inside jerked, either from flying metal or from the realization that help wasn't coming. The figure slumped, went still. 3 shots, 6 seconds, 3,847 meters. Down in the village, Knox was on the radio, his voice sharp with disbelief she could hear even from here. Confirm effect on target. Did she hit? Price was shouting. Sarah could barely make out the words through the storm, but the tone was universal. Shock. Awe. The sound men make when they witness something impossible. Multiple confirmed kills. Sir, she's dropping them. The command element is gone. They're breaking coordination. Sarah watched through her scope as chaos spread through enemy lines. The disciplined fire that had pinned Knox's team began to falter. Units that had been moving with purpose now hesitated, looked around, waited for orders that weren't coming. The 3 BTR-80s that had been advancing toward the village stopped. Commanders probably trying to raise headquarters, trying to figure out why the radio was suddenly silent. She gave them another reason to worry. The lead BTR had stopped in the open, tracks churning snow. The commander's hatch was open. Standard procedure when you thought the threat was in front of you, when you needed situational awareness more than armor protection. Sarah shifted her aim to the cupola, the small hatch where the tank commander would be standing, head and shoulders exposed above the armor. Impossible shot, even for her. A human head at nearly 4,000 meters, moving target, wind gusting, but the cupola itself was larger. And a .50 BMG round hitting that close to someone's head would do terrible things even without a direct impact. She took the shot anyway. The bullet struck the edge of the cupola and ricocheted with a sound like a bell being struck by a hammer. The commander had already ducked. The supersonic crack close enough to hear even inside the vehicle, close enough to feel. The BTR began reversing. Fast. Crew probably panicking at the idea of a weapon that could reach them from nowhere. The other 2 vehicles followed, churning up snow in their haste to retreat. Webb was yelling now. Sarah could hear it crackling through her radio. All enemy elements are breaking contact. Sir, they're pulling back. Sarah lowered her eye from the scope. Her breath came in steady clouds. Her heart rate was barely elevated. 4 shots, 4,000 meters, Christmas morning. She keyed her radio with fingers that had regained some feeling. Actual, this is Overwatch. Targets eliminated. Enemy command structure is destroyed. You have a window for extraction. Static. Then Knox's voice, rough with something between gratitude and incomprehension. Overwatch. Who the hell are you? Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Nobody could see it. Just someone who keeps her promises, sir. That's when the first artillery shell landed, 300 miles away in the Tactical Operations Center at Peterson Space Force Base. A specialist monitoring satellite feeds blinked at his screen and reached for his coffee. His hand stopped halfway. Sir, you need to see this. Major General Thomas Wick looked up from a logistics report that was giving him a headache. The specialist's tone suggested a different kind of headache was incoming. What am I looking at, Ramirez? The operation at Grid Echo 7, sir. Enemy forces are withdrawing. Complete collapse of attack coordination. Wick moved to the screen. The satellite imagery was thermal, false color, but clear enough. Red signatures representing hostile forces were indeed pulling back from the village, moving in disorder toward rally points to the east. Knox called in air support? Negative, sir. Weather is still socked in. No birds in the air. Wick frowned. Artillery? Negative. No fire missions logged. Then what the hell stopped them? Ramirez pulled up a different feed. Signal intelligence, acoustic sensors, the kind of data that could pinpoint a gunshot from orbit if you knew what to look for. Sir, we picked up 4 high-velocity projectile signatures from extreme range. Source location was, he typed rapidly, double-checking the numbers. Northwest Ridge, approximately 4,000 meters from village center. Wick stared at him. 4,000 meters? Son, nobody shoots from 4,000 meters. That's beyond maximum effective range for anything in our arsenal. Sir, the sensor data doesn't lie, and there's more. Ramirez pulled up thermal imaging, rewound to 15 minutes prior. Single signature on that ridge, small frame, been there for about 90 minutes. The image showed a heat signature, human-sized, prone position on an exposed ridgeline that Wick wouldn't have asked a mountain goat to climb. Who do we have on that ridge? According to the manifest, sir, nobody. Commander Knox's team is all accounted for in the village. Then who? Wick trailed off, reached for his own terminal, pulled up the mission roster for Echo 7. 18 names, 17 SEALs, and 1 attachment. Captain Sarah Vance, sniper specialist. He pulled her file, or tried to. Most of it was classified above his clearance, which was unusual for someone of his rank. What little he could access made his eyes narrow. Get me Commander Knox, now. It took 30 seconds to establish the connection. Knox sounded like a man who just survived his own execution and wasn't quite sure how to process it. General, SEAL Team 47 reports successful defensive position. Enemy forces have withdrawn. We have 3 urgent surgical, 5 routine, 0 KIA, requesting immediate medical evacuation. Knox, what happened out there? A pause. Background noise. Gunfire. Distant. Men shouting coordinates for extraction. Sir, we had support. Long-range support. Captain Vance. She made 4 shots from... Wick checked his screen. 3,847 meters? In a snowstorm? At night? Yes, sir. Confirmed by multiple observers. Killed the enemy command element. Destroyed their coordination. They folded in under 3 minutes. Wick felt something cold in his stomach that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Commander, I've been in this business for 30 years. The longest confirmed kill on record is Craig Harrison's 2,475 meters. What you're describing is 1,300 meters beyond that. Are you absolutely certain of this range? Sir, Staff Sergeant Price measured it 3 times with 3 different devices. Range cards confirm. Satellite imaging should confirm. 3,847 meters. Knox paused. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Less official report, more personal testimony. General, I've been doing this for 16 years. I've worked with the best snipers in the world. Canadian JTF-2, British SAS, our own Rangers. What Captain Vance did tonight wasn't just shooting, that was something else entirely. Wick closed his eyes, opened them. The numbers hadn't changed. Copy all, I'm sending the birds now. Weather's breaking enough for a window. Get your wounded to the LZ. He cut the connection and turned to his operations officer. Get me Captain Sarah Vance's full file, the real one, not the sanitized version we're allowed to see. Sir, that's above my clearance. Then get someone whose clearance isn't above. I want to know exactly who we just watched make history. On the ridge, Sarah was packing her equipment when the world tried to kill her. She heard the whistling first, the distinctive sound of indirect fire, high angle, searching. They'd triangulated her position from the muzzle flashes. Whoever was left of their command structure had decided that the sniper on the ridge was worth every artillery round they had left. They weren't wrong. The first shell landed 30 meters upslope. The explosion was close enough that the concussion wave rolled over her like a physical thing, pressing her flat against the rock. Snow and ice fragments rained down, pelting her helmet and pack. She grabbed the rifle case, started shoving the Barrett inside. Her hands were shaking, not from cold now, from the certainty of what was coming. Second shell, 20 meters closer. The sound was enormous, personal. A sound designed to make you understand your own mortality. Sarah got the rifle secured, snapped the case closed, slung it across her back, started moving. Not down the way she'd come. That route was exposed, predictable. They'd walk the artillery right down her path. Instead, she moved laterally, traversing across the face, looking for any fold in the terrain that might offer cover. The slope was steep, too steep. Running wasn't an option. This was controlled falling with extra steps. She slid 10 feet, caught herself on a rock outcropping. The rifle case banged against her spine hard enough to knock the wind out. She gasped, kept moving. Third shell, 15 meters. The blast wave picked her up and threw her like a rag doll. Sarah tumbled, world spinning. Sky, snow, trees, sky again. She hit something, rock. The impact drove stars across her vision. Everything went white for a second that felt like an hour. Stop. Assess. Move. Training kicked in before conscious thought did. She was on her back, wind knocked out, vision blurry, left leg hurt, right shoulder screaming, face wet with something warm. Blood. Her blood. She rolled to her hands and knees, looked for the rifle case, found it wedged between two rocks 15 feet downslope, miraculously intact. The Barrett could survive worse than a fall. She'd made sure of that. Overwatch, respond! Knox's voice in her ear, urgent. Vance, respond! She keyed her radio with fingers that didn't want to work. Actual, I'm hit, not urgent, taking artillery fire. Need to relocate. Negative, stay put. We're coming to get you. Sir, you are not authorized to. Another shell landed, close enough that the sound was beyond sound, just pressure and heat and the certainty of death. Sarah was moving before the debris stopped falling, crawling now, dragging the rifle case because she'd be damned if she was leaving it behind after hauling it up this mountain. The case weighed more than she did, and her body was done cooperating, but that didn't matter, never mattered. The tree line, almost there. She could see the dark shapes of pines, promise of cover, promise of something between her and the shells that kept coming. She collapsed behind a thick pine trunk and pressed her back against it. Her head was spinning. She pulled off her glove with her teeth, touched her face with fingers that came away red. Blood, not arterial, probably shrapnel. Facial wounds bled like hell, but weren't usually fatal unless they hit something important. Eyes were intact, good sign. Jaw worked, also good. She checked the rest of herself with the methodical process beaten into her by a dozen combat lifesaver courses. Left leg had a puncture wound in the thigh, already clotting in the cold. Right shoulder probably dislocated. Her ribs hurt when she breathed. Combat effective? Barely. She heard movement below. Multiple contacts, coming fast. Friend or enemy? Sarah pulled her sidearm. Sig Sauer M18, 9mm, 15 rounds. She'd rather have the Barrett, but at this distance, in this condition, the handgun was more practical. She waited, breathing shallow, fighting the urge to close her eyes, just for a second, just to rest. Overwatch, Vance, Sarah, Knox's voice. Why was Knox on the mountain? She tried to stand, her leg gave out. She slumped back against the tree. Here, her voice sounded wrong, distant. I'm here. They found her 30 seconds later. Knox and 3 others moving in tactical formation like they expected contact any moment. When Knox saw her, something crossed his face. Relief and anger fighting for dominance. You said you weren't urgent. His voice was tight. I'm not. I can walk. You're bleeding from your head and you can't stand up. Minor details. She tried to smile. Failed. The world tilted sideways in a way that had nothing to do with the slope. Knox knelt beside her. Davis, get over here. The corpsman appeared, young face tight with concentration. Started checking her pupils, her pulse, the wounds he could see. Sir, you need to get back to the LZ. Sarah tried to focus on Knox's face. It kept splitting into 2. Wounded first, remember? I'm not urgent. You are wounded. Knox grabbed her pack, her rifle case. Price, help me get her up. Price materialized on her other side. Between them, they lifted her. Sarah tried to protest. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Somewhere between the tree and the attempt to stand, the world had started fading at the edges. Captain, that's not necessary. I can... Shut up, Vance. Knox's voice was closer now. He'd slung her arm over his shoulder, was taking most of her weight. You just saved 18 lives. We're not leaving you on this mountain. Foster was there too. Foster, who'd called her a liability, who'd questioned her place on the team. He picked up her rifle case like it was nothing, like it didn't weigh 60 pounds loaded. Let's move, Foster said. No mockery in his voice, no skepticism, just professional concern. Artillery's going to resume any second. They carried her down the mountain, 2 men supporting her weight while a third provided security. She wanted to protest, to say she could manage, but the truth was her leg wouldn't hold her, and the world kept doing things horizons weren't supposed to do. She drifted, in and out. Moments of clarity punctuated by moments of nothing. Knox's voice. Stay with me, Captain, eyes open. The sound of helicopters, close, getting closer. Price's voice. LZ is hot. Dust off in 90 seconds. The world tilted again. Sky replaced by interior, metal, the smell of hydraulic fluid and blood. She was being loaded, strapped down. Someone was cutting away her gear, her jacket, checking for wounds she couldn't feel anymore. 3847 meters. That was Price's voice, distant. Did you see the grouping? 4 shots, all within kill radius, in that wind. I saw. Knox, always Knox. I just don't believe it. Believe it, sir. I measured the distance myself, checked it 3 times. That's 1,300 meters beyond world record. World record was set in perfect conditions. Clear sky, no wind, stationary target. This was a blizzard at night with a moving target and return fire. Sir, what she did up there wasn't just breaking a record. That was redefining what's possible. Sarah wanted to tell them it wasn't that impressive, that any competent shooter with the right training could have made those shots, that she'd just gotten lucky. But she'd been trained never to lie, even to herself. Those shots were impossible. She'd known it climbing the mountain, known it setting up position, known it with every calculation, every adjustment, every breath. Impossible. And yet, the helicopter lifted. Through the open door, Sarah could see the ridge, already distant. Snow was falling harder now, covering her tracks, erasing evidence that anyone had been there at all. Good, she thought. Some things were better left as ghost stories. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the light was different, fluorescent instead of natural, white ceiling instead of gray sky, the smell of antiseptic instead of cordite and blood. Field Hospital, Fort Carson probably, or Peterson, somewhere with heat and walls and people who hadn't been shot at in the last 6 hours. She tried to sit up. Her body suggested this was a terrible idea and expressed its opinion through several different pain centers simultaneously. Easy, Knox's voice. You've been out for 18 hours. Sarah turned her head slowly. Knox sat in a chair beside her bed, reading a paperback that looked like it had survived a war of its own. He set it down when she moved. Your men? Her voice was rough, like she'd been swallowing sand. Stable, all of them. Davis says the urgent surgicals are going to make it. Thompson's already complaining about the food, so we know he's fine. Knox leaned forward. Because of you. Because you gave us time to get them out. That's the job. No, that's beyond the job. That's... He struggled for words. Captain, my men are alive because you did something nobody thought was possible. Something that shouldn't have worked. Sarah looked away. I got lucky. Lucky? Knox stood up, walked to the window. Outside the sun was shining. The storm had passed. You climbed 900 meters in a blizzard, made 4 confirmed kills at a range that breaks the world record by half again. Under fire. At night. In conditions that should have made shooting impossible. He turned back to her. That wasn't luck. That was skill at a level I've never seen. Commander Knox, they want to meet you, my men. They want to thank you. Price especially. He keeps talking about the shooting. Webb wants to buy you whatever you drink. Foster, Knox almost smiled. Foster wants to apologize, publicly, in front of the entire team. Sarah closed her eyes. Tell them not to. Tell them I'm unavailable. Why? Because I'm not a hero, Commander. I'm a tool. A very specific tool for a very specific problem. I did what I was designed to do. Now that problem is solved, I go back in the toolbox until next time. Knox was quiet for a long moment. Is that really how you see yourself? She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. He walked back to the bedside, picked up his book, then set it down again. My youngest son is 7 years old. He wanted to video call on Christmas. His mother told him I was too busy saving the world. Knox's voice was soft. Truth is, I wasn't saving anything. I was about to get 18 men killed because I made bad decisions based on bad intelligence. He met her eyes. You're the one who saved us. You climbed a mountain alone in a storm on Christmas Eve and made an impossible shot at an impossible distance because you thought it was necessary. He paused. That's not being a tool. That's being human. Fallible, stubborn, magnificent human. Tears stung Sarah's eyes. She blinked them back. You don't know what I've done, what I've had to do, the things I carry. No, I don't. But I know what you did for my men. And I know that when I asked you why Christmas mattered, you said nobody should have to die on Christmas. Knox pulled the chair closer, sat down. That's not something a tool would say. That's something someone says when they've lost someone they loved, when they're trying to make meaning out of pain. Sarah looked at him, really looked, saw someone who understood, who'd been in the dark places, who carried weight. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now General Wick wants to pin medals on you. The brass wants to study what you did. The Army wants to figure out if it was a fluke or if you just redefine what's possible for long-range marksmanship. He smiled, sad. And my men want to buy you a beer and hear the story from your perspective. I don't really drink. Then they'll buy you whatever you want. The point is, you're not going back in the toolbox. Not if I have anything to say about it. There was a knock at the door. A young lieutenant poked his head in. Sir, General Wick is asking for Captain Vance when she's able. Knox looked at Sarah. She nodded slowly. Tell him 30 minutes, Knox said. The lieutenant left. Knox picked up his book, started toward the door, then stopped. Sarah, first time he'd used her first name. Thank you, not as a commander, as a father, as someone who gets to go home because of you. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. Merry Christmas, Captain. He walked out, leaving Sarah alone with white walls and the sound of medical equipment and the weight of 18 lives she'd saved by doing the impossible. Through the window, she could see snow beginning to fall again. Soft, clean, covering everything, making the world new. Somewhere in Vermont, Tommy Reeves's wife was probably putting away Christmas decorations, taking down the tree, packing up ornaments that her husband would never see again. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself cry for the first time in 6 months. General Thomas Wick was 62 years old and had 3 combat deployments under his belt, which meant he'd seen enough impossible things to know when something truly extraordinary had happened. The data on his desk said extraordinary. The problem was figuring out what to do about it. He looked up when Sarah entered his office. She was in a clean uniform, shoulders still in a sling, moving carefully but under her own power. Her face bore fresh scars from the shrapnel, red lines that would fade to white over time. Battle marks, the kind that told stories without words. Captain Vance, sit, please. Sarah sat, kept her back straight despite what it obviously cost her. Wick studied her for a moment. Young, 32 according to her file. Eyes that had seen too much. The look every combat veteran carried eventually. The weight that never quite left. I've been reviewing the after-action reports from Echo 7, along with satellite data, ballistic analysis, and testimony from Commander Knox and his team. Wick tapped the folder. 4 confirmed kills, 3,847 meters, adverse conditions. Do you know what the previous record was? 2,475 meters, sir. Corporal of Horse Craig Harrison, British Army, Helmand Province, November 2009. You broke that record by 1,372 meters. That's not incremental improvement, Captain. That's a fundamental shift in what we thought was possible. Sarah said nothing. Her face gave nothing away. Wick leaned back in his chair. I'm putting you in for a Silver Star. Gallantry in action, lives saved, extraordinary heroism. The works. You'll get a ceremony, press coverage, the whole 9 yards. Sir, I'd prefer you didn't. I'm sorry? The Silver Star, sir, the ceremony. I'd prefer you didn't. Wick blinked. In 34 years of service, he'd never had anyone turn down a major decoration. Captain, do you understand what you did up there? You didn't just break a record, you saved 18 lives. You turned a potential massacre into a tactical victory. That deserves recognition. Sir, I did my job. The men I saved did theirs. We all signed up knowing the risks. Sarah met his eyes. I don't need a medal to know I did the right thing, and I don't want attention for it. This isn't about what you want. It's about what you've proven. About showing what's possible when we give people the right training, the right equipment, the right opportunity. Something flickered across Sarah's face. Is that what this is about? Proving a point? I don't follow. Sir, with respect, I've been in the Army for 12 years. I know how this works. Female soldier does something noteworthy, suddenly she's a poster child. Used to make arguments about policy, about integration, about things that have nothing to do with the actual work. She paused. I'm not interested in being someone's talking point. Wick set down the folder. What are you interested in? Doing my job, bringing people home. That's it. Even if it means your accomplishments go unrecognized? Sir, the 18 men who went home to their families recognize it. That's enough. Wick studied her, saw the steel underneath. The kind of person who'd climb a mountain in a blizzard, not for glory, but because someone needed it done. All right, he said finally. No Silver Star, no ceremony, but the record goes into the books. Official U.S. military sniper records. Your name, your shot, your achievement. That's non-negotiable. Sarah nodded slowly. I can live with that, sir. Good, because whether you like it or not, Captain, you just changed the training manual. Every sniper school in the country is going to be studying what you did up there, trying to figure out how to replicate it. They won't be able to. Why not? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Because it wasn't just training, sir. It was necessity, desperation, the absolute certainty that if I didn't make those shots, good men would die. She looked down at her hands. You can't teach that in a classroom. Wick thought about that, about the difference between people who could shoot and people who would shoot when everything depended on it. No, he agreed. I suppose you can't. There was a knock, the same lieutenant from before. Sir, Commander Knox is here with his team. They're requesting a moment with Captain Vance. Wick looked at Sarah. She nodded. Send them in. They filed in like schoolboys waiting to meet someone famous. Price first, then Webb, then Foster and 4 others. 8 men in various states of recovery. Thompson on crutches, Martinez with his head bandaged. All of them alive when they shouldn't be. Knox stood at the back, letting his men lead. Price stepped forward first, held something out, a brass casing, battered and worn, with something scratched into the base. Ma'am, we found these on the ridge, all 4 of them. Team took a vote. We want you to have one, as proof it happened, as thanks. Sarah took the casing. It was still cold. The inscription read, December 25th, 3847 meters. We kept the other 3, Price continued, one for the team room, one for the battalion museum, one for the record books. He paused. Yours should say something else. He pulled out a knife, held it ready. What would you want it to say, ma'am? Sarah turned the casing in her hands, felt the weight of it, the history. For Tommy, she said quietly. Just that. Price took the casing back, carefully scratched the words below the numbers, handed it back. Sarah closed her fingers around it. Foster stepped forward next. The big sergeant who'd questioned her place on the team, who'd called her a liability. Ma'am, I owe you an apology, a big one, public. He took a breath. I was wrong about you, wrong about everything. You're the best damn shot I've ever seen, and you proved it when it mattered most. He extended his hand. I'd be honored to serve with you again. Sarah shook his hand. You were protecting your team, Sergeant. That's not wrong. That's what good soldiers do. Webb was next, then the others, each with their own thanks, their own version of the story, the shots they'd seen, the enemy that scattered, the window that opened just wide enough for them to survive. Thompson, the kid who'd been shot in the leg, spoke last. Ma'am, I've got a girl back home. Been dating 2 years. I was planning to propose this Christmas, but then we got deployed and I thought, well, maybe after. He shifted on his crutches. I called her this morning, asked her. She said yes. Sarah felt her throat tighten. I get to marry her because of you, because you climbed that mountain and made that shot. I just wanted you to know that. Wanted you to know it matters. What you did matters. Sarah couldn't speak, could only nod. Knox stepped forward then, let his men file out. When it was just the 3 of them, Knox and Sarah and Wick, he spoke. General, I'm formally requesting Captain Vance be assigned to SEAL Team 47 on a permanent basis. We need a shooter of her caliber, and she's earned her place with us. Wick looked at Sarah. Captain? Sarah shook her head slowly. Thank you, Commander, but I work better alone. Always have. That's not true, and you know it. Knox's voice was gentle. You worked with a spotter for years, Lieutenant Reeves. He's why you climb mountains and take impossible shots. Because you're trying to balance scales that can't be balanced. Sarah's hand tightened on the brass casing. Tommy wouldn't want you to be alone, Knox continued. He'd want you to keep shooting, keep saving lives, keep being the person he knew you were. You didn't know him. No, but I know you. And I know what carrying that kind of weight does to people. Knox moved closer. Sarah, you can't bring him back. No matter how many mountains you climb, No matter how many shots you make, he's gone. I know that. Her voice was barely a whisper. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're still trying to die on a ridge somewhere to prove something to someone who's not here to see it. Knox's voice was firm, but kind. That's not honor. That's punishment. And you don't deserve to be punished for following bad intel. Sarah looked up, tears on her face now, not bothering to hide them. He died because of me. He died because the enemy killed him, in a war, doing the job he volunteered for. Knox knelt so he was at her level. I lost 3 men in Fallujah in 2004. Bad call on my part. Wrong building, wrong intel, wrong everything. I carried that for years, still do. But I learned something. What? The best way to honor the dead is to save the living. That's what you did on that ridge. That's what Tommy would want you to keep doing. Sarah closed her eyes, felt the weight of 6 months pressing down. Then, slowly, felt it start to lift. Just a little, just enough. I'll think about your offer, Commander. Knox stood. That's all I ask. He nodded to Wick and left. The general waited until the door closed. There's one more thing you should know, Captain. I tried to push your Silver Star through. Make it public. Pentagon shut me down. Sarah wiped her eyes. I told you I didn't want it, sir. It's not about what you want. It's about what they don't want. Wick's voice hardened. They're uncomfortable with the optics. Female soldier breaking records, proving capabilities some people would rather not acknowledge. They approved the record for the books, but nothing more. Low profile, quiet recognition. That's fine with me. It shouldn't be. You earned that recognition. You should have it. Sarah managed a small smile. Sir, I've spent 12 years in the Army. I know how this works. The institution moves slower than the people in it. That's okay. The work matters more than the credit. Wick shook his head. You're a better soldier than I am, Captain. No, sir. I just know what's worth fighting for. 6 months passed like pages turning in a book nobody wanted to read. Sarah took leave, went home to Vermont, visited Tommy's grave, brought a wreath, placed the brass casing on the headstone. I made the shot, she told him, told the cold marble in the frozen ground. 4 for 4, just like you taught me. She stood there for a long time, snow falling, the world quiet except for wind through bare trees. I'm sorry I didn't save you, but I saved them, 18 of them. I think you'd be proud of that. The marble didn't answer, never would. She was turning to leave when she saw her. An older woman, maybe 60, gray hair, familiar eyes. She was placing flowers on Tommy's grave, her movements slow and deliberate. Sarah froze. The woman looked up. Recognition dawned. You're Sarah. It wasn't a question. Mrs. Reeves, Sarah's voice cracked. I'm so sorry I should have. I know who you are. Mrs. Reeves stood. Thomas talked about you. In his letters. In his calls home. He said you were the best shooter he'd ever worked with. Said you had a gift. Mrs. Reeves, He also said you'd blame yourself if anything happened to him. Made me promise to tell you something if he didn't come home. Sarah couldn't breathe. Mrs. Reeves reached into her coat, pulled out an envelope. Worn, sealed, with Sarah's name written in handwriting she recognized. He wrote this before his last deployment, gave it to me, said if something happened, if he didn't make it back, I should find you and give you this. Sarah took the envelope with shaking hands. He knew the risks, Mrs. Reeves said softly. He chose this life. He wouldn't want you carrying guilt that isn't yours to carry. I got him killed. No, the enemy killed him. The war killed him. Bad intelligence killed him. You were trying to save lives, including his. Mrs. Reeves touched Sarah's arm. Read the letter. Let him tell you himself. She walked away, leaving Sarah alone with the envelope in the snow and the weight of 6 months. Sarah opened it carefully. The paper inside was standard notebook paper, folded twice. Tommy's handwriting, Neat and precise, the way he did everything. Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm gone. First thing you need to know, don't blame yourself. We both knew what we signed up for. We both knew the risks. I made my choices same as you made yours. Second thing, you're the best natural shooter I've ever seen. Better than me. Better than anyone I've worked with. That gift of yours, it's not just training, it's instinct. Trust it. Don't let my death make you afraid to pull the trigger when lives depend on it. Third thing, keep shooting. Keep saving lives. That's how you honor me. Not by dying on some ridge because you think you owe a debt. By living. By using that gift to bring people home to their families. I told my wife I wanted to have kids someday, build a house in Vermont with a view of the mountains, grow old watching sunsets. I don't get that now, but you do. Don't waste it. Don't throw it away because you think you don't deserve it. You deserve everything good this world has to offer, Sarah. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you different. Merry Christmas, partner. Keep making the impossible shots. Tommy. Sarah read it twice, then a third time. Then she folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and sat down in the snow next to Tommy's grave and cried until she had nothing left. When she was done, when the tears had frozen on her face and the sun was starting to set, she stood up, placed one hand on the cold marble. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, Tommy, I'll try." She walked away, didn't look back. Some goodbyes were final, and that was okay. 3 months later, Sarah stood in front of a classroom at Fort Benning. 20 faces looked back at her. Young, eager, scared in the way everyone was scared before they knew what they were truly capable of. "My name is Captain Sarah Vance. I'll be your chief instructor for advanced long-range marksmanship." She paused. "Some of you have heard stories. Some of you think you know what I did in Colorado. Let me be clear about something." She picked up a Barrett M82A1. Let them see it. "This weapon can shoot 3,000 meters and change in the right hands, under the right conditions. You will never take that shot. Do you know why?" Silence. "Because I got lucky. Once. In conditions that shouldn't have allowed success. And 18 men went home because of that luck." She set the rifle down. "But luck isn't something you can train. Skill is. Discipline is. The ability to make the shots that are possible every single time without fail. That's what I'm here to teach you." A hand went up. Young corporal, maybe 22. "Ma'am, is it true you hold the record?" Sarah smiled. "Records don't matter, Corporal. Bringing your team home does. That's the only thing that matters." She spent the next 6 months teaching them everything Tommy had taught her. Wind reading, ballistic calculations, the difference between knowing and feeling, how to make your body still when everything in you wanted to shake. She was good at it, better than she expected. Turned out teaching was its own kind of shooting, finding the right target, taking the right approach, seeing the impact. Christmas Eve came around again, 1 year since the ridge, since the shots, since everything changed. Sarah sat in her office at Benning, looking at her phone. She'd been staring at it for 20 minutes, working up courage for something that shouldn't require courage. She dialed. It rang 3 times. "Hello?" A young voice, female, 14, maybe 15. "Hi, is this Emma?" "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Sarah Vance. I'm a friend of your Uncle Thomas. Was a friend. I worked with him." Silence. Then, "Aunt Sarah?" Sarah's throat tightened. "Your uncle talked about me?" "All the time. In his letters, he said you were the best shot in the Army. He said when the war was over, he'd bring you home to meet us. I should have called sooner. After he died, I should have reached out to your family. Mom said you were hurting, that sometimes people need time." Emma's voice was gentle, too gentle for 15. "Are you better now?" Sarah thought about that, about the ridge and the shots and the weight she'd carried, about Tommy's letter and his mother's forgiveness, and the choice to keep living instead of keep dying. "I'm getting there," she said honestly. "Uncle Thomas would be happy about that. He worried about you, said you were too hard on yourself." Sarah smiled through tears. He was right. They talked for an hour. About Tommy, about family, about life. When they hung up, Sarah sat in a quiet office and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not complete, not perfect, but real. Her phone buzzed. Text from Knox. "Merry Christmas, Captain. Team's having drinks at the club on base. You're invited. No pressure. But we'd love to see you." Sarah looked at the message, thought about her apartment, empty, quiet, safe in its loneliness. Then she thought about Tommy's letter, about living instead of surviving. She grabbed her coat. The club was warm and loud and full of people who understood what Christmas in uniform felt like. Knox was at a table with Price and Webb and Foster and a dozen others. They saw her, waved her over. "Captain!" Foster stood, pulled out a chair. "We saved you a seat." Sarah sat. Someone put a glass of something in front of her. Not beer, something fancy. "What is this?" "No idea," Webb admitted. "But it's expensive and you saved our lives, so you get the good stuff." They toasted. To survival. To brothers. To the people who made the impossible real. Later, after the drinks and the stories and the laughter that came easier than Sarah expected, Knox walked her out. "You did good in there. The team appreciates you showing up. Thanks for inviting me." They stood in the cold, breath fogging, snow starting to fall. Always snow at Christmas. "I heard you're teaching now, Fort Benning." "Yes, sir, advanced marksmanship. Turns out I'm decent at it." "I'm not surprised. Tommy was a hell of a teacher. You learn from the best." Sarah nodded, didn't trust her voice. "The offer still stands, you know. Permanent assignment with the team. We could use someone with your skills, your instincts." "I appreciate that, Commander, but I think I'm where I need to be. Teaching the next generation, making sure they're better than I was." Knox smiled. "You're already better than most people will ever be. But I understand. Teaching is its own kind of service." He saluted. She returned it. Sarah drove home through falling snow, thinking about everything that had changed in a year. The ridge, the shots, the weight she'd carried, and the weight she'd put down. Her apartment was dark when she got home. She turned on the lights, made tea, sat by the window watching snow fall. On her desk was a frame, the photograph she used to keep hidden in her pack. Tommy in uniform, smiling, alive. Next to it, the brass casing. "For Tommy," it said, and next to that something new. A letter from the Army. Official. Brief. Captain Sarah Vance. Official U.S. military sniper records. Longest confirmed kill, 3,847 meters, December 25th, Colorado, A.O. The record was real, documented, part of history now. Sarah picked up the brass casing, felt its weight. "We did it, Tommy," she whispered to the empty room. 4 for 4, just like you taught me." Outside, snow covered everything, made the world new, made tomorrow possible. Sarah Vance, who had climbed a mountain in a storm, who had made the impossible real, who had saved 18 lives at nearly 4,000 meters, sat in the quiet and felt something that had been missing for 6 months. Hope. Not that the past would change. It wouldn't. Tommy was still gone. The weight was still there. Some things you carried forever. But hope that tomorrow would be different, that the work mattered, that the lives saved were worth the price paid, that Christmas could be Christmas again. She raised her teacup in a silent toast. To Tommy, to the 18, to everyone who climbed mountains because someone had to. Then she turned off the lights and went to bed. Tomorrow was another class. More students, more chances to pass on what she'd learned, more chances to keep the promise. Outside, snow fell on Fort Benning, fell on Colorado ridges, fell on a grave in Vermont where a brass casing rested against cold marble. The world turned. Records were made, lives were saved. And somewhere between the impossible and the real, between the past and the future, Captain Sarah Vance found what Tommy had wanted her to find all along. A reason to keep shooting. A reason to keep living. A reason to believe that Christmas morning, even after everything, could still be beautiful.